Anatta. Finally, in this trilogy, last but not least, the three characteristics of existence, or three fundamental faculties of anicca, dukkha, anatta, spelt A-N-A-T-T-A, with a line over the A, which means it's pronounced R as opposed to A. And I misspelt dukkha yesterday. When I spelt it, I left out a K, as I so often do. My Pali name has double K also in it, and I often remember we don't have double K in English, so it's unique to the Pali language. Anyway, dukkha is D-U-K-K-H-A. Not to be confused, these words, with the Sanskrit words, which is a different language, and is more often used in the northern traditions of Buddhism that you could say are Mahayana, and even in some of the Chan or Zen traditions, Japan, China, use that language. But here, where I am, in this southern tradition, and this part of the world, the Theravada, meaning way of the elders, monastics trying to practice as closely to the original Buddhist teachings from the suttas as is possible, which is very close, and we use the Pali language. And I've been talking about these three characteristics, firstly anicca, and then dukkha, and today anatta. And in each of the previous two talks, I've cross-referenced with all three. This could have been one long talk about the whole subject. Collectively, I would include in the Pali word panya, P-A-N-N-A, meaning wisdom, which is the third of our practice. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila, moral virtue; Samadhi, meditation; Panya, wisdom, which makes up the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path begins with right view. And included in right view, which is the wisdom aspect, or Panya, of the Noble Eightfold Path, even though it's first and foremost in the Noble Eightfold Path, and seemingly comes last in anicca, dukkha, in Sila, Samadhi, Panya, it is just because it goes in a full circle. So we begin this path with wisdom, and that is knowing the Four Noble Truths, that there's suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, and this path leading to the end of suffering. Therefore bringing you back to the beginning, right view, and also included in right view is the full knowing, understanding, comprehension, feeling, experiencing the nature of these characteristics of existence. So not intellectually knowing the words or being able to define it accurately through learning the definition, but through experience of this practice, keeping moral virtue, and through the practice of meditation, of developing wholesome mind states and reducing unwholesome mind states, and therefore allowing us to see clearly, where there can be another Pali word we hear, vipassana, which means seeing very clearly, the truth, the reality of life, the fundamental faculties, or these three characteristics of existence. That which are, to some extent, aside from causes and conditions, but with full understanding and comprehension of them, allow us to step aside from causes and conditions that establish what we think we are in terms of our personality, this form, this physical body, this thinking brain, and even to some extent our mind, our scope for understanding, our scope for emotion, experiencing of happiness, of sadness, of hate, of love. All of these things we think are us are not. And that is what anatta means. It is translated usually as not self. And not self is a fairly good, accurate translation, as long as you understand what we perceive and believe self to be. Now, of course, it isn't something that ordinarily we go around thinking about. The first two, anicca and dukkha, are ever present. We see impermanence in everything we experience through emotions and physical feelings, and in objects that through decay, entropy, old age, just the passage of time, eventually change or disappear, break down. All conditioned things are impermanent. Suffering, likewise, we see experientially on a daily basis, minute to minute basis, suffering, even in the slightest form. You try and sit still for a little while, it won't be long before you feel the inclination to move. Why? Because you're experiencing discomfort or unsatisfactoriness with your position. You need to move. This is suffering. This is evident. It's clear. But the notion of not self isn't something that gives us concern or reason to think about of its own accord throughout our existence. In fact, you could live an entire lifetime and never conceive of the idea of there not being an actual self. In fact, this is possibly what the majority do. So why is it even important? Well, one of the first stages towards enlightenment is fully understanding the teachings of the Buddha, not in respect of just the fact that they are teachings and we should learn them and understand them, but through, again, experientially, knowing that there is suffering, knowing there is a cause of suffering, an end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering, but essentially understanding the nature of suffering and impermanence, so anicca and dukkha. This knowledge is requisite for the attainment of the level we call sotapanna, or stream entry, the first level of enlightenment. And it isn't just knowledge and, again, learning and reciting it, it is feeling it, knowing it as being not just a name, the Four Noble Truths, but actually the truth. It has to be, and the truth, once understood, there's no grey areas. There's no black, it's black and white. There's the truth and there's not truth. Now, the truth is quite simple. There is suffering. There isn't a being living on this planet that doesn't experience suffering. So it's quite a simple thing to understand if we keep it simple. And I try. In fact, I can't help but keep things simple. So if you want complicated, you can read in books, you can look at other videos. But if you want simple, stay with me. Let me explain the principle of not self, because I'll keep it very simple. It is that. And Buddhism has a tendency to get quite animated and excited about the subject. There can be quite considerable amount of debate. But when we see what it isn't that different to understanding the simple the simplicity behind the first two, anicca, impermanence, and dukkha, suffering. It's quite simple. So, anatta, not self. We experience through this physical body and through this thinking mind our lives through the windows of seeing, of hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And we also, with these thinking minds, have the ability to think, imagine, remember, conceive of ideas, and we can also experience emotions. So there is all of this, which is as a result of the causes behind the conditions that we live in. So seemingly we can blame everything that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel and think about on the conditions that we live in. But behind the conditions that we live in, there have to be causes. Now, the primary cause for any conditions we are experiencing is birth. The primary cause for death is birth. It all begins in this present lifetime with birth. And with this present lifetime ending at the cessation of this physical body's life and this thinking mind's thinking, consciousness, cognition, there is that which knows, and in Buddhism we understand that goes on to be reborn into another life. And during this lifetime, it builds with it a bank of karma, we call it, which is the Pali word for actions. Actions of body, speech and mind, which are either good or bad, and have a result of generating those causes. Both here within this lifetime, here within this short period of time. For instance, if you take a break from work, buy a ticket, go on an aeroplane, go on holiday to another country, it's all as a result of where you are, is all as a result of the causes you put in place to create the conditions of being in a foreign country on holiday. Similarly, if you spend a lifetime of doing good, it should be the case correspondingly that when you're reborn, it will be into a good realm of its existence. And to the contrary, vice versa. I'm telling you all that because it's really the grounding behind why we should understand the principle of not self. Because let's say we've done lots of bad things in our life, and then suddenly we stop and we decide to follow the Noble Eightfold Path and try and just do good things with our life. Now, you have built up many causes that can result in unfortunate conditions previously to now, but you've stopped that so that all that matters for this present moment is what you do hereinafter. So we don't spend too much time worrying about what's gone before, regretting, feeling guilty, seeking forms of what's that word that you go to the vicar for in Christianity? Absolution. No. We accept we've done bad things, we will have to pay for those actions at some point in the future. But not necessarily in this lifetime, maybe in the future. But then the more we do, in terms of good from here on after, the more it balances out. So right at that very point, this bad person, for example, in the suttas, the story of Angulimala, who was a serial killer. He'd murdered some 999 people and was going to then murder the 1000th person, being the Buddha, collecting their fingers, which are Anguili in Pali, and had them hanging around his neck on a necklace which is called a mala. So he was called Anguili Mala. So he had 999 figures. You don't have to believe the story, get the principle behind it is what it's about. But it is a true story. And he encountered the Buddha and everything changed. He stopped killing and he ordained. And being as he was ordained by the Buddha, he became an arahant very quickly. This happened in those days through causes and conditions that were the result of previous lifetimes. Because of course in this lifetime he'd done nothing in terms of developing parami, which are good qualities in his life, to warrant or deserve becoming an arahant. But this lifetime is just a very small part of our overall existence of countless lifetimes previously. So this is why it's only important what this person is now, here and now, and endeavours and tries and determines to be in the future. So this serial killer is now a monk. So where's the serial killer gone? Where's the personality gone? Well, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's like a flame. It's ceased to burn. And Angulimala, the Arahant monk, is now whom we call Angulimala. So once I was a family man, a businessman, with a suit, and I lived in England. Now I'm a monk. Family have all grown up and live still in England. And I don't wear a suit. And I live here in the forest like this. Two very different people. But all that's in common, all that is the same, is, and here's where we cross-reference with all of these talks, is that which knows. We call the citta in this tradition. You can think of it as the mind, if you like. But that which knows I'm now a monk and used to be a businessman is the same knower, the same witness, observer to all that is happening. And it is also the storehouse, the bank for the good and the bad things of body, speech and mind I am doing in terms of trying now to develop wholesome mind states and reducing unwholesome mind states. But if previously we had been the reverse, not through immoral action necessarily, but let's say just overindulging in lavish lifestyles, watching too much entertainment, eating and drinking too much, running from here to there, trying to just get sensual gratification and endlessly striving for pleasure, a hedonistic lifestyle if you like, we're not developing wholesome mind states. In fact, we're fueling unwholesome mind states of greed and desire. And this develops what we call a personality. I don't really use the word ego because it comes from yet another language and I don't really understand, well, put it this way, it gets a little overused. If we think of personality, we all know exactly what that means. And also, personality can be positive or negative. Whereas ego tends to have associations with a little bit of arrogance, conceit, negativity. You wouldn't say positively about someone he's egotistical. It would be a derogatory comment. Whereas if you say he's got a personality, it means neither one thing or the other. Because we all have personalities. And anatta does not mean you do not have a personality. But the second thing in this first stage of enlightenment, after understanding fully the Four Noble Truths, or the truth, to the extent you're living the truth, not believing, just knowing, because it's the truth, it doesn't need to be believed, just understood so as you know it. The next thing is, in Pali, Sakkaya Ditthi, which means also the abandonment of Sakkaya Ditthi, which means the abandonment of personality view. Now remember, this all comes under the first step and the most important step of the Noble Eightfold Path of right view. And we even use the same word in here, the abandonment of personality view. So that is the view that our personality is us. And that is what we call self. So I started by saying we need to really understand what the meaning of self is, or what we attribute to self as being part of what we think is us. So not self means the abandonment, no, not self means that self is not what we perceive to be us, in terms of it is not our personality. Our personality is a direct cause of conditions that we are experiencing or have experienced. Causes and conditions create what we believe are us. So you may have gone to school, had an education, gone to college, university, and you are an educated person. Or you may not have had that opportunity and you are an uneducated person. Neither are better or worse than the other, but one could consider them different personalities or types of people. Actually, they could be the same personalities, they just have different attainments, but it could send them in different directions in their lives, whereby the causes and whereby the conditions will cause different outcomes and produce different personalities with time. And this also goes from life to life. But we can keep it all within this lifetime, because you may not have the inclination to try and get around the concept of rebirth at this stage of your understanding in terms of Buddhism, and it isn't 100% necessary that you do. But logically speaking, I can say that through the experience of this practice, ultimately you will come to realize that there is and there was this event of rebirth, something that is part of the ongoing continuum of existence. Because it is that through this practice we're trying to break free from. We're not trying to annihilate ourselves in this lifetime to become free from suffering. We're trying to detach the dependence, the thirst, the addiction, if you like, the craving to existence through sensual stimulation and gratification, in order to separate that which knows, which isn't the personality, away from this physical body and this thinking mind, in order that it can clearly see very clearly, vipassana, these three faculties of existence, anicca and dukkha, that we've discussed, and also anatta, that we are not this personality, this physical body, or this thinking mind. What we are is that which witnesses these things, this thinking mind and this physical body, which are a result of causes and conditions. And even the experiences we're going through are just a result of what we're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching, and then thinking about recalling memories from the past to associate all feelings or contact through those sensory windows into what we interpret with this thinking brain as our understanding of what we're experiencing. And then using imagination, the powers of prediction, to conceive of ideas into the future as to what this all means, what we're seeing or what we're experiencing right now, how that will develop. For instance, you may experience a small pain, and from this you may remember that last time you had this small pain, it developed into a much greater pain. So you will immediately think, oh, here's that small pain, that is going to generate into a greater pain, so now I'm going to start worrying about it. And this is misconception, because it's not looking at what you're experiencing right in this present moment, it's looking into the past and predicting the future. And this can only be inaccurate. You might have a lucky guess, but of course it is just a guess. It's also based on shaky foundations of memory in the past. And memories are very unreliable. We tend to remember what we want to remember and push away a little or hide away what we don't want to remember. Certain traumatic events, it can be the reverse, you know, where it's impossible to get rid of a bad memory, which is understandable. But mostly we look at the good old days as being good memories. So who was there in the good old days, whether you were in your college days, in university, or you were in your early part of your job, wherever you work, whether you were a young parent or even in later life when you become middle-aged and your children grow up and you even become grandparents, you're then grandparents. Now, as grandparents, are you the same as you were as teenagers? You don't get many teenage grandparents, but you're very different. One's idea of a grandparent and a teenager is quite a different thing, isn't that right? But in fact, the grandparent would not be a grandparent if they hadn't been a teenager. So is this teenager or is this grandparent the true self? No, because there is no self. There are teenagers and there are grandparents as a result of causes and conditions that surround them, which we are responsible for. We must always remember, we can't blame anyone else. Even if you're really forced into a situation against your will, there will be some cause in your past that you've put in place to mean that you were in this particular situation to arrive at being pushed into where you don't want to be right now. But all that matters is where you are right now and how you experience it. And when we experience everything in the present moment, it is all just seeing, just hearing, smelling, tasting and touching. And can you, through those senses, and can you, from the result of those senses or contact with seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching, change your feeling? So say you're in a bad situation and you feel uncomfortable about it. Can you change that feeling uncomfortable about it? No. It arises, you feel uncomfortable about it, you get used to it, and it passes away. Your body is naturally deteriorating as you get old, as you're going from teenager to grandparent. Your sight gets worse, your hearing gets worse, your skin gets wrinkly, your hairs go grey, you walk more slowly, your bones ache, your joints ache, all this and that and the other. Can you control this? No. But if we were ourselves, we would say, no, I don't want this body now to get any older. It's got to a good stage now, it's quite fit. I want my eyesight to stay just right like that and be able to hear everything clearly. And this is what we would do. But we can't. We have no control. So usually when I translate anatta, I translate it as things that are not within our control, which is everything. So I usually say it is anicca, so uncertainty, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and anatta, uncontrollable, which are slightly inaccurate translations, but more easy to comprehend the same thing. Because if we see everything as out of our control, there cannot be a personality. And you are therefore abandoning your view that there is a personality. You are abandoning Sakkaya Ditthi, which is actually the first requirement of the first stage of enlightenment, the abandonment of Sakkaya Ditthi, the abandonment of personality view. Then the full understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And there's only one more thing in this first stage, and that is the abandonment of rites and rituals. I won't go into all that in detail, but it's simply the understanding. Again, this is always understanding, not learning, it's understanding and knowing the truth. The abandonment of rites and rituals, just to cover it quickly as I've mentioned it, is knowing that whatever we're doing in the temple or your church or your mosque, any of this praying, any of this worshipping, is only to develop wholesome mind states and reduce unwholesome mind states. It isn't going to get you what you want. You will not get what you want by praying for it, hoping for it. You'll get what you want by working for it or acting in accordance with how you need to act responsibly, well, with moral virtue, in order to deserve it and get it. And this is what we require in Buddhism as the third understanding of abandonment of rites and rituals. So when we're chanting, when we're paying homage to the Buddha, it's not to go to heaven or avoid hell. It's not to become rich. It's not to pass our exams. It's not to live a long life. Although we will ask for these blessings, these are just good wishes. Like someone would say happy birthday or Merry Christmas. That person is just understanding that you're wishing that they have a happy birthday and they have a Merry Christmas. They don't perceive it as a God-given right because you've said it. God-given right, for instance, that expression, there is no such thing. It's just an idea. It's passing the responsibility away from ourselves and taking ourselves away from being responsible for our own karma and the sole beneficiaries inheriting our own karma. Because that is it. All our actions of body, speech and mind, good or bad, are karma and come back to haunt us. More literally than that, they affect us immediately and thereafter. You tell a lie, you may think you've got away with it, but it's in the back of your mind. You steal something, you kill someone. You engage in acts of sexual misconduct. Even taking intoxicants affects your judgment, your mindfulness. So just those 5 precepts I've mentioned are going to affect the way you're able to move forward in your life, whether positively or not. And if you break those precepts, you can't adhere to them, then it will be not. It only has negative effects on the outcome. And if you're a meditator, your meditation is only going to work on solid foundations of sila. Otherwise you have this constant unsettled feeling about the past, worrying about the past of what you've done, and the future, what that may entail as being the result of what you've done in the past. So this is why we keep sila. So right view encompasses these three that I've been talking about, of anicca, dukkha, anatta, as well as the Four Noble Truths. And the abandonment of personality view as part of these three characteristics of existence is also part of this first stage of enlightenment. So you can see everything leads to something else. In these lists, these Four Noble Truths, these Noble Eightfold Paths, these stages of enlightenment, these 4 stages of enlightenment that there are, even in this first stage of enlightenment, there are 3 things. This isn't numbers for numbers' sake, it's a way the Buddha taught to make it easy for us to understand. And we can cross-reference all of these numbered lists with each other and find commonalities in them all. And this makes it a very holistic, wholesome and easy to understand set of teachings. Because whenever you hear something, you've kind of heard it a little bit before, but in a different context. And that is reinforcing continuously as you hear through these talks the same ideas. So I'm always coming back to the practice, which is sila, samadhi, panya, the 3 divisions of the Noble Eightfold Path. And I'm always coming back to the truth, the answers, which are anicca, dukkha, anatta. So in this last few videos, including today, I've spoken more about anicca, more about dukkha, and more about anatta, whilst referencing its siblings there, anicca and dukkha, to really expand on that understanding. But when you understand those, you have the basis of right view. So whether we like our personality, whether we don't like our personality, whether we feel we're popular or feel we are unpopular, whether we have fame or whatever's the opposite of fame, well, whether people say nice things about you or whether people say horrible things about you, whether you're experiencing health or sickness, all of these things are happening to the physical body, interpreted and understood by the thinking brain. But that which knows this as not you, not self. This mind, this citta, is outside. It's detached from what is going on. And if you can put yourself in this position, it's easier to see the principle behind anatta, not self. So I think, and I hope that covers, really, it is quite simple. We are not our personalities, we are not even these physical bodies, we are not these thinking minds. We are not the emotions we are experiencing. We are not the liking and we are not the disliking. We are that which knows. Take these 2 things: when we're happy, we know we're happy, but what knows we're happy is not happy. When we're sad, we know we're sad, but what knows we're sad is not sad. It just knows, you see. It knows we're happy, it knows we're sad, without feeling either way. Slightly separate. And this is not self. Knowing that. So I hope that helps, and I will leave it at that. Please, if you have any questions on these three videos on anicca, you'd like me to expand on anything I may have said, rightly or wrongly, I may have made some mistakes in your view, or on anicca, on dukkha, or anatta, please send me something in the comments or by email, and I'll gladly open it up for more discussion in the future. It will continually come up in everything I talk about, because this is, after all, what Buddhism is. It is understanding the truth. And the truth is something we can choose to ignore, but it's still there. And it's still affecting us. So even if you ignore it, you will be the result of these conditions and the cause of these conditions. Good. So I hope there's something useful there, and if there is, please use it. If not, you can just ignore it, and if you can, please share this with anyone else you think might be interested. And thank you very much for watching.